All right, welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I am your host, David Carr, founder of Steward Your Business, where we bring people together to accomplish great things. And this week we have an amazing new guest, Mindy Honcoop. We're super happy to have you here. HR innovator, advisor, just an all-around amazing person. We're
Mm,
glad to have you
thank
here, Mindy.
you. I'm so
Absolutely.
excited to be here. I just loved
Yeah.
our first conversation and getting to meet you and all the great work that you do. And I wish we had recorded that call. So
Oh,
I'm
yes.
excited to finally be able to do that. Thank
Yeah.
you for inviting me.
Absolutely. This podcast, we talk a lot of issues that business owners, leaders face, Mindy, and you're on the cutting edge, I really believe. Uh, and we're going to dive into that a little bit today. But before we do that, I like giving people an opportunity to learn a little bit more about you, your journey as a business owner. Why do you
Mm,
start your company and your specific angle, Mindy? So, if you wouldn't mind, take us back a little bit before you started Agile and
yeah.
in HR, and what got you to where you're at today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll try to keep it short.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I I I have been in the world of HR for over 25 years. I can't believe it. It was 25 years in June, and longer than I'd like to admit. And I fell into HR through the world of social work,
Mm,
and have always just had a calling to help people, to drive
mhm.
positive impact, to be able to kind of help people realize what was possible
Yeah.
when they didn't see it before. And so I think I've always loved being the concept of being a guide
Mhm.
and walking alongside of someone to help them go to a place they didn't think they could be before and taking them from point A to point B. And
Mhm.
so I really saw the possibility of that through social work and then saw just the tie in of social work and workplaces. Because really, social work is really looking at ecosystems, and each
Mhm.
workplace is its own unique
Oh,
ecosystem.
yeah.
And it's really around how do we take people from point A or a group of people from point A to point B and think about, what is that iterative behavior change that we are coming alongside of them and being able to help understand different tools and resources along that journey to help move someone to a desired future state and creating ecosystem awareness of how the ecosystem from a sociology point of view can help better come alongside of and be aware of often the invisible within our ecosystems. And so
Mhm.
my husband and I got married when I was still in college. He's 3 years older than me. He was already in the workplace, and as I was learning the world of social work, he often would overhear me and say, "Man, I really wish our HR person would have asked this." And I was like, "HR, talk to me more." So he set up a meeting. And from there, was in the backyard in Seattle, started at Microsoft, and then went on to Expedia and other amazing organizations. And really, fell in love with how do we create healthier workplace ecosystems because I truly
Mhm.
felt healthier workplaces, healthier communities and society.
Yeah. No, I think that's so great, Mindy. And I remember one of the things we talked about before we started recording this, and why I wanted to have you on the podcast, was what you took HR in a different direction than I've seen. And I see a lot of things that's just kind of compliance. It's a little bit more reactive at times, not so
Mhm.
strategic. And I thought, okay, you're looking, and I love the word ecosystem. And I,
Mhm.
my background is in biology and nature, and I find like but there isn't. Sometimes people aren't thinking about this so strategically and thinking it
Yeah.
further ahead. And I think that's where you're unique and a little different than I've seen in coming and taking all this experience that you've had.
Mhm.
Um, and so, what does that look like for you as you've been moving forward to actually move from a reactive to more strategic
Mhm.
approach in
Yeah.
creating that ecosystem?
Um, I find it's the ambiguity because it's the
Mhm.
and I love that I worked underneath leaders and within organizations that really inspired my curiosity. Like I've always
Uh-huh.
been curious. I've always looked for there's got to be a better way. You put a
Yes.
line on a paper, and I always try to think about how can we make that line better,
Yes.
especially with a connected group of people. And so how can we approach this in a different way?
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and for me, the alignment of technology and people and driving together towards shared outcomes within the ecosystem of work is really how we as people, as humans, are really exploring and experiencing this ecosystem. And that is all the things, right? How are we experiencing how we're doing the work with the different technology tools that are at our resources, who the members of
Yeah.
our team, our managers, and all the overlay of what's provided within that ecosystem, and how aligned is it or not? How easy
Mhm.
is it or not to use? I mean,
Yeah.
all the way down even to the knowledge management and data
Mhm.
and accessing tools. And I've always loved technology because I just always saw the opportunity for it to help and positively impact the ability for people in workplaces to do better ways to do
I
their
I
work and get their work done,
Absolutely.
and but also free them up to do more of what they wanted to do, right? Like, so many of us start a job, we have the best of intentions, we have like all these dreams of what we want to accomplish and how we want to move the needle forward within that company. And then how often do we start to see that someone starts to become disengaged? Because they're frustrated,
Yep.
they're also disconnected, they've lost that
Mhm.
sense of clarity, they've lost a sense of am I impacting the end result of of how this company is successful? I don't understand. And that breakdown, and it breaks down in so many different ways, and is where that strategic piece, if we could be more proactive and start to think about, what is that ecosystem, what are the overlays, how do the people, process, and technology, how are they connected or not, and how do we move through when we think of the ever ongoing change that exists within a workplace and in an ecosystem as it
Mhm.
evolves? Because every time we depart or introduce a new person or human into an organization, that's also dropping in an element of change.
Yep.
And
It's like
so
all the
when we
storms of
communicate,
change. Yeah.
and then
Even
that
if it's a
em
good change, right?
right?
Still
Yes,
change.
and it's just that employee, even the employee journey, right? And
Mhm.
or even the concept of the journey of, uh, incorporating a new way of working or a new technology, or
Mhm.
departing an old piece of technology. How are we communicating that, or thinking about how people are feeling about that, and how is that being thought of when we're thinking about how we communicate it? We're asking people questions, and are we using leading questions? Because if I'm in a place of power asking employees for their feedback on something very significant, and I, as let's say someone early on in my career, and your my pay is, you make the decisions about my pay,
Yep.
and that level of, if there's not that level of trust,
Yep.
if I'm asking questions in a very leading way as, a person of influence and power, and I may not even intentionally mean to, but if I
Mhm.
don't even have that if I don't even have that ability to understand how I'm even asking a question, then the answer is going to be caveated or couched or less than what the true answer is.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
I mean, all of these are layers
Yeah,
within
yeah.
an organization. And that's why it's so important for me that when we do come in, that we have to be thinking about the people and all the things that make us complex. And
Yeah.
how can we start to break that down, and how we drive and think about decisions around process and technology. And if we aren't having those strategic conversations with the people in mind, we just diminish our ability to drive to greater results.
Well, I'm gonna let the audience in on a little secret here, because those of you that haven't done the five voices assessment, I know what Mindy's five voices assessment is, Mindy,
Mhm.
and you are that connector, creative, what I call pioneer. And what's interesting about that, and what I think you bring uniquely, just who you are, and is what I call the future-oriented voice. Not everybody is always future-oriented, and I'm not saying this is good or bad. It is your gift, but sometimes you get a lot of HR folks that are very much more present-oriented, only dealing with compliance today, and we need both. It's not either
Yes,
or,
right.
right? But what you're saying is a lot of folks, they don't look at that, and then they're kind of already behind. If they get somebody that's just going to come in and try to implement some things and not preparing for the future, you're going to be behind. And so what I hear you saying is, why don't you get ahead of it and be in a better place supporting your team rather than
Mhm.
lagging?
Right, right. And I think that's so hard. It's so and that's where I come alongside with HR leaders and in the
Mm-hmm.
blend of coaching, advising, and consulting in
Mm-hmm.
different ways. It depends on
Yeah.
where they're at, but it's often they want to be working in a different way, but they're often missing what is that next step because they're
Yep.
in a place of overwhelm often, and they've gotten lost along the way sometime. I mean, it's different.
Mhm.
There's a different story for each person, but it's this desire to be able to be having different conversations with the leaders in the organization, to be
Mhm.
showing up in a different way, to be in that proactive strategic mindset, but also the day to day has to get done. and
Yep.
and knowing that also that there's just this level often that they have around the shame and the guilt of I
Mm.
I'm not showing up in that way. I need to be, but I don't know how. And I'm already overwhelmed with what I'm just doing now. And, maybe I often, when I start working with individuals, unfortunately, sometimes the first question is, maybe I am the problem, Mindy.
Mhm.
Maybe I can't do this anymore. I used to love this. I don't love this anymore. And
Mhm.
so often it's also just being able, when we start to shut down in that way, as no matter what you're in leadership, when we start to come into a less than mindset, it's like a
Mhm.
scarcity mindset.
Yep.
We also start to filter from an emotional place, and we start to not see the facts anymore, and
Mhm.
we get some blind spots put in
Oh, yeah.
place. And sometimes it's about being able to come to a place of coming alongside of someone and
Mhm.
just even, let's take a step back. Let's take
Right.
a breath and let's get a different perspective on the situation and what might be possible here. What can we control? And
Mhm.
what would different look like? What haven't we tried yet? And often it's amazing how people will keep trying the same thing over and over and over again.
Yep.
And and it's like and not realizing why it's not working.
Yep. Well, that's a value, and the reason why we have the Business Roundtable podcast, Mindy, is to get voices like yours out there, reaching a different group of folks that you wouldn't hear, and we're saying, hey, look, you don't have to go alone.
Right.
And here's a voice, here's another person. In this case, Mindy's helping HR professionals and coaching and guiding and facilitating them to help be better. And so that you don't
Mhm.
get stuck in a rut and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, you know, I didn't really even realize I had that blind spot. I mean, I'm still getting coached because I have blind spots. I need help along the way and I'm trying to help those further
Same
along,
here.
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't end,
Yeah.
right? We were talking before
Yeah.
we were recording. It's like we're continuing ongoing, but we're helping those be that are coming along, that are maybe further behind us. And I feel like, Mindy, you have such a passion for this and wanting to see
Mhm.
organizations show up healthier
Yeah.
and break down. And like you said, I think I was listening to one of your other podcasts. Sometimes people are even, don't even aware or what they're doing in these things, and so you can help them. As a good coach is just asking, like you said, leading questions
Yeah.
and getting them some perspective, and like, oh, I didn't even
Yes.
realize I couldn't consider that, right?
Right? And seeking to understand. I think
Mm-hmm.
also within sometimes initially when I'm working with someone that maybe first time into the leadership role, a lot of times we doubt ourselves when we're
Oh, yeah.
taking a new job.
Yeah.
And we often will just start, oh, of course they know more than me. I'm just going to go do this. When it,
Mm-hmm.
when it's really even, are we clear on even what does success look like when someone's
Mm-hmm.
asking us to do something? What is it? Have we taken the time? Do we clearly understand? Okay, that sounds great. Can you help me understand, when this is done, what does done look like for you? What does
Yep.
success look like for you in that? And, have we tried in this organization, tried to do something like this before? What didn't work? It's about that curiosity mindset. But
Mm-hmm.
because often in HR, we have all the things, we become the kitchen sink of the
Mm,
organization often, where
right.
we have we have a lot of things that shouldn't just be transactional, but often currently are talked about in a transactional way
Mm-hmm.
and should be strategic, but we're just like going through the motions because
Yep.
we're just trying to stay o- we're above water. We're just trying to, some of the
Yeah.
people often feel like they're drowning or
Yes.
about to drown. And so
Mhm.
and how can I even go and try this different thing when I barely can get through the day? And then I
Yep.
feel shame and guilt because I want to think about how do I use AI, or, how do I use human-centered design? Mindy, I heard your podcast, but I don't even know how to make it through my day. And
Mhm.
so how do we, in the moment of where they are, just get the ability and place to breathe and be able to shift a perspective and be
Mhm.
able to think about, okay, when the next time someone comes up, with that next thing to do, how might we stop and have a conversation and just be curious and ask
Mhm.
some questions that also help them have some realization of, oh, actually, I didn't think about it that way before. That's a really good question. And
Mhm.
maybe what I just asked about isn't the best next thing for us to do, and start to co-create. It doesn't have to be HR alone in a closet designing everything, but
Yes.
how are we actually facilitating with the right leaders and employees, um, co-shared solutions?
You're hitting the nail on the head, Mindy, because that, again, that's why I wanted you on the podcast because of what you're doing. Honestly, really, because I'm, with me, my company, Steward Your Business, I'm looking at the leadership team. I've seen a lot of people come up from the technical ranks. I've done, for over 25 years myself in professional services, environmental
Yeah.
consulting, and you have a lot of people that are great at being an engineer, a biologist, an archaeologist,
Yeah.
whatever the case might be. And now you're asking them to step up into management and leadership roles, and they don't have those skills. They don't know them. They don't even know how to, they might make a misstep because they don't understand, oh, I shouldn't talk about it this way, not because they're trying to do anything wrong. They're just unaware. And
Right.
so, like you said, co-creating, I like how you're saying this of like, don't just wait for HR to do all of it because it needs to come from both sides. It's like
Hmm.
HR needs to, I think, support and create a ecosystem, if you will, a
Yeah.
framework for it to thrive. But you also, you as a group manager or leader, department
Yeah.
head, what the case might be, you have to take initiatives as well. You know your people, you know what they need, hopefully, or you get some feedback and say, how can I support them better? What can I
Right.
do to help them along their career? Because that's what I find too, Mindy, nowadays. Um, there's people that have, again, never been a supervisor. They don't know what that looks like. How do
Hmm.
I be a supervisor? Do I just talk with them once a month? Do I, how do I do a
Right.
performance
It's
review?
not
How
like
do
you're
I ask?
injected with
Yeah.
manager skill sets like the Matrix, right? We're not like
Yeah.
uploaded with manager capabilities. And there's also this sense too for some leaders that now that I'm a leader, I'm supposed to know all the answers. Like my team
Right.
support is like, for some reason, there's this lie that I truly believe it's a lie that
Hmm.
leaders are supposed to know all the
Yeah.
answers, that employees are supposed to expect you to have all the answers. Some of the
Yeah.
best leaders I've worked with have created the space of asking questions
Hmm.
to co-create with their teams because they come from a place of, I'm only as great as my team. And you know
Hmm.
what? I don't have all the answers. I'm not the day-to-day expert, but I
Right.
have those people on my team. And by bringing those experts together, which I love about Agile, the concept
Oh,
of the Agile theology, the frameworks, is because it's all about teaming and how do we
yeah.
create self-managed teams and how do we bring that level of expertise and teaming together. But the manager, actually, by giving all the answers, whether they're
Yep.
right or wrong, actually stops at a level collaboration, because now the team is just relying on the leader for the answers. They're not being um, elevated, or their strategic skill set has become stunted because
Hmm.
they're just waiting on someone to give them direction on what to do, and they are also waiting for the answers from their leader, which
Yeah.
to some point doesn't scale, because then you as a leader become a
No.
blocker, right?
Yep.
I guess I could go
Absolutely.
on forever and
I know,
ever
Mindy.
with.
No, I mean that's why you're absolutely right. That's why we're because you and I are very complementary to each other here in this conversation. Because yes, I see this happen where there's a stunted, like, yeah, you cannot scale that. And what I find is the business owners, oftentimes they have not invested in getting somebody like yourself. Both two sides of there's two, I say there's two sides of a coin here.
Yeah.
You have the HR side that you're talking about, Mindy, that hey, we have to figure out, yes, we have to do some compliance and there's basic things we have to cover. And then how do we be more strategic in creating this ecosystem? And then how do we integrate that with the rest of the company? Because I find sometimes, particularly if you're talking people that are not in the admin world, they're not quote unquote in the office or whatnot, they feel like, hey, there's us against them kind of mentality at times,
Mm,
or we don't want to, I don't know if I trust them, they're part of the company, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Have you talk
yeah.
a little bit about that, Mindy, and your experience there?
Ugh. And I see that a lot too around, as if we aren't aligned, if we don't
Hmm.
have the trust, as we're growing and scaling, the smaller we are, the easier it is to communicate. We have known ways of working. But as we start to introduce new people, and if we haven't done a really good job of setting a way of working, a standard
Hmm.
operating, oh, whether you want standard operating procedures don't sound very exciting, but they
Yes.
create that level of clarity, right? Of how we
Hmm.
do work and how, work gets done here really well. And how
Hmm.
often are we looking at those and refining them as we, are obviously evolving. And
Hmm.
obviously that doesn't usually happen. It's just people have worked together before, they start something great, then
Hmm.
they start growing and scaling. And the more we just start to break down with communication
Yep.
and alignment. And then everyone thinks that they have buy-in, but they don't because we haven't fully vetted something. We haven't, heard from everyone around the room. Do you have questions about this? People may not feel comfortable asking questions. So they're walking away with a half formed thought on what their role is, what's expected
Yep.
of them, what does success look like. And then we start to see the siloing, right? We start to
Yeah.
see people doing the best that they can with the limited awareness and
Hmm.
I think we're aligned, but are we? And it just and that just compounds and compounds and compounds. And I start to see, how do we pull back from that? Like
Yes.
once we lose sight of that, what's at the point? But then there's fear, right? Then there's fear
Yes.
that comes in around, oh my goodness, like, is that my fault?
Hmm.
Our fault? And
Right.
is there trust in this room to have a conversation of like, hey, I'm not sure where we are anymore, or I'm
Mhm.
not sure what's expected of me. And do your direct reports feel comfortable like asking questions and saying, hey, I'm not sure. Can you help me understand? And
Yeah.
and the fear just like compounds. And one of the things with like AI and digital transformation, and when we have these silos, we've like, and the lack of communication and alignment, and we have all these meetings where actual decisions aren't even being made, and
Mhm.
people are going off and people are wondering, why am I like saying the same thing 500 times and yet I'm not seeing any progress, or I feel like I'm
Yeah.
talking about the same thing over and over again. But there's a sense of fear. And then when we're in a place of fear and scarcity, we start to do the less than behaviors like
Mhm.
micromanagement
Yeah.
and all the things. And it's
Mhm.
just, like, it's, and I often find fear is like right now, the fear and the uncertainty and which really shuts down the level of creativity,
Oh,
the
yeah.
the level of collaboration, of trying things out. And with AI and with the world that we're moving into, these
Mhm.
are things we haven't done before.
Yep.
And we're not going to get it right the first time. So we're going to have to fail. But do we
Yep.
have the room and the capability in a human way to even go into that space? No, because there's lack of trust, there's
Yes.
fear, there's uncertainty, and if we're not comfortable being having change is uncomfortable. And if we're already at capacity with our discomfort because we're in a working situation that's already has all the things we talked about,
Mhm.
introducing more discomfort with trying something new, you're not going to say yes to that. But it's the
Mhm.
very thing you need to if you want to continue to grow and evolve and stay relevant and meet
Mhm.
whatever needs of the people that you're serving as a company, whether it's a product or, a service you're delivering. And so that's where you start to see the breakdown in those results and where you
And
don't
it
see.
and Mindy, when you do have
Yes,
those
stop me.
breakdowns.
I keep
Yeah.
talking.
No,
Sorry.
no. So when you do, and I'm agreeing with you. I look at alignment, I look at the relationships, look at trust, I look at how communication is being done. Um, it takes time to rebuild trust in on
Hmm.
different areas. And so
Yeah.
it's worth it. It's worth it, absolutely worth it, but
Mhm.
it does take time. It's like
It's
getting into
hard.
debt. You didn't get into debt overnight.
That's
I
right.
mean, you're not gonna get out of it overnight, and I
Mm-mm.
think some people want a quick fix, and they don't realize this is gonna take
It's gonna
time,
take
but it's
time.
so worth it, right?
So worth it, but it's uncomfortable
Mhm.
and it's hard and it requires a level of vulnerability,
Yeah.
and that brings up fear for
Mhm.
people, and that's the very thing our central nervous system, our survival mode, whether w and often it's not even at our level of consciousness,
Yeah.
and then we're avoiding the very things that we should be leaning into without even realizing it. And that's
Mhm.
often one of the biggest challenges, and one of the things that I've started to see, like, the biggest conversation we should be having as an organization is almost like doing, and maybe this is probably not the right word, I wish I had a better word, but and if you disagree with me, by the way, please
Yeah.
let me know. I love to have a disagreement.
Yeah, yeah.
It's healthy conflict. Uh,
Uh-huh.
Patrick Lencioni, 5
Yep,
Dysfunctions of a
Patrick's
Team,
great. Yeah.
uh, is about, is about fear, like doing a fear audit. How is fear
Mm.
showing up in this organization?
Uh-huh.
How is fear as a leader keeping me from being able to truly see the current state in a
Uh-huh.
way that is factual and not
Mhm.
emotional? Like, I feel like that is like one of the things that I'm starting to try and lean in with, is to really think about how is fear showing up, and how is fear keeping us from the true conversations that we need to be having to truly identify what's getting in the way of us coming
Do you think,
together.
Mindy, one thing I've seen, as a third party outside of the company is it gives a different dynamic there where, people sometimes are too close to the issue, like you're saying.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
sensitivity, there's emotions there, and they need to be worked through, but it's really hard when you're in the middle of it. So, I found, at least when I'm working with clients, is I come in as a independent third party, and I can start to kind of see things. Is that kind of your experience too, Mindy, where you can kind of
Hmm.
come in and
Yeah.
separate that out a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and I think it's really helpful, because then it's also about how do we facilitate a conversation in a way that doesn't place blame,
Mhm.
where you, like, also aren't pointing fingers,
Right.
because you are a third party and you're able to think about the future and about
Right.
moving forward, and
Mhm.
I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, I think having, healthy conflict, or you could use the word collision as well. I'll have to give
I
you a
like
different
that.
word, right?
Yeah.
We're willing to collide, we're willing to have those tough conversations if, especially if we understand at the end of the day we're on the same team and we'll be better
Mhm.
off.
Mhm.
But there is a bit of a, I think, setting the frame, setting the environment, like you said, Mindy, to have that, so it's
Yeah.
conducive to that, because it, if done well, it can be great, but it can, if
Mhm.
not done well, it can do more harm than good, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yes. 100%. Yeah. And that's why often, people like, "Oh, well, I wanna save," if we talk about money and investments, and
Mhm.
I hear you, and I love the, whether, because often executives will be like, "Well, I can do that. I'd be able to have that conversation." I'm like, "I'm sure you could." But just because you are who you are in the role that you are, and you're on the team, you're actually a participant of this
Yeah.
conversation. And and having an external person come in allows you to be able to stay in the boat of one team,
Mhm.
versus you being the person asking everyone else to be in the boat. That's a different, it just sets a different context.
Yeah. Oh, I've been there myself, Mindy, to your point.
Mhm.
Been in that place where I thought I could, just to your point, say I could do it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think I was pretty objective. However, what I didn't take into consideration, Mindy, was what other people, their preconceived ideas and notions, no matter what I thought, they had preconceived ways of thinking and being
Mhm.
and whatever they had on me. And I couldn't change that story. I couldn't change that narrative because that's
Right.
theirs.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So it's like, so then you're like, okay, but then you're out of that and you're coming in, and that's the value of having someone like yourself as a third party coming in alongside and being your resource, so that the
Yeah.
person can objectively say, oh, hey, Mindy, can I talk with you or bend your ear on this? Because
Uh-huh.
I know I'm it's I'm tainted. I don't know what the word you want to, but I'm a party of this. So no matter how much I try to be objective,
Yeah.
I got some. I've just got to be realized there's what I want to say, some kind of conflict of interest, if you will, here,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. And, and sometimes it is amazing how someone doesn't even realize how much of an expert they are about the space that they're in and the solution that they are considering, but wouldn't have moved forward with because of the lack of confidence they had in themselves to move it forward, bring it forward. It would have just
Mhm,
remained an idea. And
mhm,
so, man, there's so many times I come alongside of HR leaders that will, well, what do you think? I was like, okay, well, I mean, I could tell you what I think. Well, let me ask some questions.
mhm.
They're like, but I hired you to make this happen. And I'm like, okay, there are times where I will just jump in and
Yep.
like, because it's an immediate fire and we need to put
Mhm,
it out. But
mhm,
often the beauty is within in asking a few questions, simple questions.
mhm,
Well, what do you think about this? What might great look like? Because they've thought
mhm.
about it. They've been at these companies for a while. They have
Yes.
experience. And they,
I,
well, this is kind of what I was thinking, but I don't really know. I just, yeah, blah. And then they talk themselves out of, but I'm in a moment, I'm like, oh, wow, actually, no, that is exactly like, help me understand why you it feels that that might be the approach. And like, well, because I tried this before, and kind of what I learned from that was this. And so, I really do think this might be a good next step. And well, what might it look like to try that?
mhm.
Or why are you hesitant? Why might you have thought? Because it sounded, when you came in to this conversation, it didn't feel like you even had an answer. Like you were, you didn't even know where to begin. And
Mhm,
and yet this sounds like you've had some thoughts into this. What might have kept you from like moving forward with this? And then they will uncover maybe some blockers or things that make them hesitate or have lack of confidence. But the thing is, I didn't give them any answer.
well,
They they
yeah,
had the answer.
they had it. Well, that's the power. Sometimes people don't understand the nuance here. So I want to point out for a minute what you're saying. You're acting in this case, Mindy. You truly are a coach. A coach is asking questions rather than a consultant, and a consultant is more telling you. And I think this is
Mhm.
where I think we're being mindful as when we are consultants, because to your point, if you're very directive and you're saying do this, do this, do this, and you're not as clued into the culture and what they've created, you might be doing more harm than, because you're
Yes. Yes.
right, because they, and
Yes.
it's not theirs either, like you just said. It's not theirs. Well, the consultant gave us it, the consultant told us. Well, make it
Mhm.
your own, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big difference.
Is a huge difference, and that's why when I started doing this work, when I birthed Agile in HR, I had worked with some amazing HR consultants when I was an in-house HR professional and leader, but often that work we was amazing, but we'd have to go back and spend some hours changing and evolving in order to integrate it
Mhm.
into the workplace and to
Yep.
really think about what is the change elements that are going to be needed to make this successful. What things
Mhm.
might we need to let go? Where do we start? Maybe we shouldn't do all of it at the same time. And that's where I wanted to do something different. I
Mhm.
wanted to come at it from a blended approach of HR advising, guiding, mentoring,
Mhm.
and elements of coaching. I hesitate to say coach because I'm not a certified
Yeah,
coach,
but we're
but
but here,
but
I'm
it's
gonna
true.
challenge
Like
you
you
there
have
for a
to
sec,
like know
Mindy.
the context for it to be
Yeah,
successful because it's an ecosystem, right?
yeah, yeah. Oh, I think we all can. So. I'm gonna challenge you. Another. I hear you don't have to be certified. I think all of us can be. If you want to put mentor in there too, is a better word, if a mentor. But coaching is just being, like you said, curious, asking
Hmm.
questions.
Yeah.
So if coaching is a word for people and that are listening to this, but I want to encourage everybody to think at some point you should be asking the questions and not be
Yes.
so consultative and directive,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Especially when dealing with ecosystems of work.
Yes.
Um, because you
Right.
could do way more harm than
Mm-hmm.
good. And you
Mm-hmm.
need to meet them where they're at and
Yes.
understand that current state and
Mm-hmm.
really approach it from a place of curiosity, but also
Mm-hmm.
of iteration, because
Right.
there may be data that we actually don't have, but we need to try something first
Yep.
in order to find what is the true signal to inform before we spend a lot of time and investment and money into something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that definitely, Mindy, as I hear you say that, is a total creative voice. Not everybody has that creative voice, being able to see and be innovative and kind of have that early warning system. And I so appreciate that, because you're willing to try some new things, and in a healthy
Mhm.
way, you're going to get people that might be more what I call guardians or nurturers that are more resistant to change, but they understand and
Uh-huh.
they value that. They're like, okay, I value it. Versus, you're just going to mess up my world. I'm going to dig my heels in. No, thank you.
Right,
Right.
right. Yeah. And I don't want them to ever be like, "Oh my goodness, I'm never gonna be able to do this because the consultant never taught me how." Like, and so
Hmm.
that's true too, like, or I wouldn't want anyone to ever rely on me. Like, it's
Hmm.
almost I always think about it as, Mary Poppins that came in and that, the movie wasn't really about her, it was how she set up this family to be successful. She gave the family, the
Hmm.
parents, the toolkit and the
Yep.
resources to, literally close the gap that they had within that family where they had that level of brokenness and
Hmm.
disconnect. And as they were floating away, it wasn't like they were crying and saying, "Oh my goodness, Mary, what are we going to do without you?" They were celebrating this beautiful moment as a family, flying their kites for the first time. And I
Uh,
love that, right? And so
yes.
that's where I want to be like it's like Mindy's like behind the scenes, but the leaders and the HR person, they're celebrating this like moment together and Mary Poppins isn't even there. Like she's
Yes.
not even in their celebratory moment. She's like flying away.
Yes, yes. That's a great image. And if you haven't listened, I haven't listened to that song in a while, but that's a great song too. You can go listen, Let's Go Fly a
Yeah.
Kite. Oh man, Mindy, I know we're running short on time on the
Um,
podcast today, and then we could definitely continue. And I'm probably have to have you come back. But
oh, I'm
I
always
love that.
open to that.
Yay, yay. No, but I think being a part of the journey with them, and
Yes.
where do they need help and coming in and out, and I think that's what I love about having you
Mhm.
here on the podcast. By the way, I'm going to make sure everybody that's listening, make sure Mindy and I are connected on LinkedIn. We're going to put
Mhm.
links to her. Um, Agile and HR. You guys can connect with her, and
Yeah.
she's got amazing other videos on YouTube and
Mm,
other podcasts. She's just a great speaker. So we're only
thank
getting a
you.
snippet of you, Mindy, today, but we're grateful for it, that you can connect with them. As we're wrapping up the podcast today, though, Mindy, I just kind of, we covered a lot of ground. So, I know you're coming alongside those HR professionals or the companies that are struggling with perhaps they don't have a full-time HR person.
Mhm.
They're still trying to figure out how do I do this well. Um, or the people that like, how do I show up as a manager and work well with HR? There's
Mhm.
a couple different
Mhm.
things we talked about today, but what are maybe some thoughts, final thoughts, right? That you want to share with our audience today, that you would just say, hey, this is just if you took nothing else from this conversation today, take this with you. Hopefully, this will resonate with them. But what would that be for you? Just that you'd want to share with our
Mhm.
audience.
If yeah, because I have this word vomit in my conversations, and so it's easy to get lost in all the things. If I were to synthesize just a couple of things, it would be
Yeah.
like, 1, really ask, where is fear showing up for me? Where is it
Mm-hmm.
holding me back? Journal a little bit, like, kind of around that. And 2, where maybe is there even like self-awareness is so powerful. Like, where might there be some less than moments coming up for you that might be blocking you from being able to lean into greater conversations? And that's also around curiosity, because I find that we fear and less than can keep us from asking the questions that we need to
Yep.
drive greater change. And so the third thing is the need to be curious. Is stop. Don't just jump into just doing something, but really like lean in and listen, truly listen, full body
Mm.
listen. And then also it's about co-creation. It's about, if we are being siloed in our conversations and our decision making. Where are those key stakeholders across the organization? Do I know who they are? Do I have true relationships with them? Do I know them as people? And how do I start to get curious about how work is done here, and how we partner together to get that work done, to be able to reduce some of that siloed feelings.
Oh man, Mindy, you gave us a lot of gold here today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was really a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much. It was such a joy. Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, I hope you got some good notes there. Of course, we love it when you leave a comment, share, subscribe if you found value on this. Make sure others hear it. So we can reach others and help them. We want to be healthier, like you said, Mindy, earlier, creating a healthier ecosystem, whether you're on the HR side or working with HR. Make sure you connect with Mindy. Again, thanks, Mindy, for being here on the podcast. Come back again and join us.
I would always love to do that.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Until next time, be well. Take care, everybody.
Bye.